I am an activist. I do feel like it's important to me to be part of creating beautiful spaces in San Francisco. I love the city more than anywhere in the world. So, and I feel really deeply committed to it being accessible, it having, diversity and inclusion built in from the ground up, like to be having the conversations around who is here and why are they here and who feels comfortable here and how do we make space, really make it so that there's, a feeling of belonging and that people come and they have experiences that they remember for the rest of their lives. You can't do it in a vacuum.
That was Marcy Coburn, Senior Director of Creative and Marketing at San Francisco's Pier 70. I'm Jeff, and this is Storied San Francisco. In this episode, Marcy picks up where she left off in part 1. If you missed that, please go back and check it out. In 1992, she came out to friends while on a walk across the country. Once she was back in California, she had to go through that process all over again with her parents, to some surprising results. Marcy moved to San Francisco in 1994 and talks about the gay and lesbian scene in neighborhoods like the Mission back in the 90s. She worked a number of food and agriculture-related jobs and ended up at CUESA, which runs the Ferry Building's farmers market. While there, she started to think of ways to inject a more meaningful experience into food and drink events. She took that knowledge over to Pier 70, a development just south of Oracle Park that honors San Francisco's industrial and maritime history and puts artists and makers at the forefront. We end the episode with Marcy's outlook on the city moving forward. Here's Marcy.
We didn't live together. I did a little stint in Santa Cruz, but we were together all the time. And then, so that's when I started to have a life in San Francisco.
Do you want to talk at all about coming out to your family?
Oh, sure.
That's up to you.
Yeah. So my parents got divorced. My mother had several marriages, and then she had gone off on her own. When I left to go on the Walk Across America, she had gone on her own adventure. And I called her to tell her I was a lesbian, and she came out to me as a born-again Christian, and she had met Jesus while we were apart.
In a weird way, I want to be like, that's fair.
I know. It was like, okay, well, cool. And she met him on acid, and then she became an evangelical Protestant. So she's been very religious since then. We were not raised that way. So,
right.
Yeah, we were raised agnostic. My father's probably an atheist, but agnostic. And experienced lots of religion, culture, but nothing, be questioning, but nothing specific.
I'm just imagining that call. How did your mom receive your news?
She was like, "Oh, that's great." And I think I was framed around meeting someone. Mm-hmm. And she's like, "I met someone too." And I was like, "Awesome." And she's like, "Jesus."
They've written books about my guy. I mean, wow.
Yeah,
okay.
So that was that.
Yeah.
And then Dad took it a little harder, to be honest.
Oh, no. Okay.
I think because he was so working class and had been raised in Florida and so working class, I think he did that very classic thing, which is to really think that it was a choice.
Oh.
And he thought it was I was choosing to make my life really hard.
Right.
And not being able to marry a man, in his mind, this man of this generation was you are destined to not be taken care of, be poor,
right.
Not be okay. And it was, to him, it just meant he was going to have to worry about me and my safety, those kinds of things. And so it was rough. He didn't take it well. My stepmother actually is a saint, and she stepped in and was and has gay family members and was mm-mm. So we spent some time not talking, and then my stepmother really kind of brought us back together.
Oh, good. Okay.
And so, yeah, we're good now, but
cool.
And have been for a long time. But it was rough. It wasn't good at first. But I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to just go figure this out.
Right.
Mom's with Jesus. Dad's with bigotry. I'm just going to go do my own thing. And I really had good community, though, friends that were amazing. And so I figured it out. And at that time, you could live in San Francisco. You could get a job. You could get an apartment. And you could make $10 an hour, and it was okay.
This is 94?
Yeah.
That you moved here?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now you're in San Francisco. Where were you making $10 an hour? What kind of things were you doing besides jobs, but then also what else?
Yeah. When I first got here, my what was my first job? I think it was Veritable. Vegetable.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So, and they paid me $9.90 an hour, and that was like a lot. It was great. It was like good money and long hours and crazy hours and all that. But I got to be in a warehouse with a bunch of dykes in the middle of the night, which was great. Yes. And talk about like music. We would listen to like amazing music while we were picking through the parsley box, like in the middle of the cooler in the middle of the night. And I have great friends from that time that I'm still friends with.
Rad. That's 30 years.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, almost 30 years ago. Yeah, it's nuts. I think that like there was a time in the 90s in San Francisco that like the gay 90s in San Francisco, which was just so unique to San Francisco, which is really, you ask any, especially like self-identified former lesbian or dyke from that time, who was coming of age in the 90s in the Mission in San Francisco. It was like a very unique time. It was like we had so much going on.
I was just about to ask where did you live?
I lived in the Mission. Out? Everybody did.
Yeah.
I mean, you could go anywhere in the Mission and there was like stuff, like cool stuff to do. It was like Bearded Lady Cafe. There were clubs every night of the week. There was, I think it was called Donna's Playhouse there was like a comedy club. There was a Baghdad Cafe on Market Street. There was like Leather Tongue Video. There was like motorcycle, repair shops. Everyone had a motorcycle. You didn't have to have a car. You didn't have to make a lot of money. It was an awesome time. Yeah. It was really fun.
So you felt like pretty right away, you're like, this is I'm doing the right thing.
Oh, yeah.
Did you imagine at that point that you'd still 30 years later-ish?
No, I know.
Because we didn't think in terms.
I know. I didn't even think in terms of like career, like having a real job or like having we were very, I mean, for me too, because it was like this, it was a radical time, but it was also very working class. Like it was very like we sort of honored and respected people who were just like, mechanics and, working in a factory. Like, and there were certain gay jobs. Like there were certain jobs that you could do in, and have a mohawk and wear black leather and, have facial piercings. And they were like, you could work at Rainbow, you could work at Good Vibrations, you could work at Veritable Vegetable. There were like just a handful of jobs that really you could be like fully tatted up and have all the things and get the jobs. So, and those were like labor jobs.
Right.
I didn't see anybody in black leather and facial piercings, like, walking down Market Street, et cetera, or something like that. And so I think at that point I remember a girlfriend of mine got like a wrench tattooed on her leg. Yes. And it was awesome, but she was like, this is my commitment to like being working class, and like now she's a principal in Seattle and like
even better.
Yeah,
even
totally.
Better.
But like has a total career. But like at the time it was like, we're grungy, we're alternative. This is what we're gonna be always. And gosh, no.
Do you want to walk us through some of the changes you saw in San Francisco over the next couple of decades, but also maybe some changes that you might have gone through in terms of jobs or I mean, that's a lot of growing up, or a lot of, I guess growing up is just a stupid term, but like,
totally.
You've settled, you put down roots, even though you didn't know it. Like,
and I actually left and came back a lot, which was also something that I think was pretty common back then, where we would bounce around. Like at one point I took a road trip across country and stayed in Provincetown on Cape Cod for a while, and then came back, but I always came back, and I always had an in when I came back, right? There was always like somebody with a room in their apartment, in their flat, and somebody had a job, It's not
impossible now, but it's harder to come back now. So I think that's part of like, it just used to, there are still places in the world you can live and you can leave for a while and come back. It's still easier than it is here, I think. But
so the last round for me was in like 2005-ish. I left, was in a relationship. We moved to the East Coast. Like, we did some other stuff. And then when I tried to come back, it was like, oh, I'm priced out. Like,
Right.
I don't think I can do this.
Right.
And that was when, then it was like looking at like Oakland and Vallejo and all these other towns that people, had settled in to try to figure it out. And I ended up buying a house in Oakland in 2012. So
Oh, wow.
I did. I like shamefully expatriated.
Hey,
But yeah, like
that's reality.
it is. It's
right?
reality.
Yeah.
And it was like yard and, garden and things that I could afford over there that I could never get here. I could this for the same price. It was like I could get a tiny condo or I could get a house with a yard,
And is that where you live now?
Yeah, that's where I
Okay.
still am.
What part of Oakland?
So right in North Oakland, like right on the South Berkeley border. So
Okay.
like down, like Alcatraz, Sacramento.
So you're like back. You mentioned university earlier.
Yeah,
You're kind of closer to
definitely. I know,
that area.
right? Life's
Yeah.
so funny that way. I know.
Circulation and
Yeah.
But you now work in San Francisco.
Yes.
Did you always have jobs in San Francisco, or were you moving around? Or?
No, I directed the Eat Real Festival in Oakland for a
Oh,
while,
yeah.
and the Food Craft
Okay.
Institute over there. So I did work in Oakland for a while.
Okay.
And then
I've been to one of those.
You
When
have?
it was in Jack London. I
Yeah, Jack London
believe.
Square.
Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
lot of fun.
Those are really fun. So yeah, I did the Oakland. I did Oakland food. So I did Ecological Farming Association for a while, which is based in Santa Cruz, and that's like a big farming conference in Monterey every year. And then the Eat Real Festival, Food Craft Institute. So I was in like the food and beverage scene for a long time, and then went to CUESA, which is
I wanted to talk
the
about
Ferry
CUESA.
Building farmers market.
Yes.
So and did that for almost 6 years there as the CEO. So that was like the moment that brought me to where I am now in terms of like centered around food and beverage for sure, and sustainable agriculture and farmers, but also that sense that there's a thing which has a name or not a name, which is about creating third places or like ecosystems that are not identifiable by necessarily just what you're eating or drinking or seeing or what the buildings are, but it's what happens in between, what happens in that energy that creates spaces that are memorable and important.
I love that.
It's really hard to articulate that, but that's that magic energy that like really drives me in terms of where I am now in my career, because it's a combination of, sure, yeah, you take a really cool historic building, you throw an amazing event, you have perfect food and excellent mezcal, for example, and you do this thing, but then something else happens when you have all those elements together that's like, wah!
The umami of events.
Yes!
Or experiences. Someone will come up with a word for it.
So good. The umami of events. Or magic. I just call it magic. Or people have talked about it, how it's like a spiritual experience for them. A lot of people feel that way about the farmers market. They go every week. It's something like a church-like experience where it's like you're going and you're seeing people you know and love, and you're getting, the smells and the taste and the flavors and the energy and the light and the color and the atmosphere that you love, and that is a spiritual experience.
I don't want to get ahead of your story, but
Yeah.
what you're talking about, I feel like for those of us who know and appreciate what you're talking about, that was one part that was so hard about the pandemic, right? Is that
Yes.
like the door just closed, and it was like, have fun with
Yes.
Netflix, y'all.
Totally.
Which, thanks Netflix, by the way. Anyway.
Sure.
But,
yeah.
But
Right. No, I know. I think that I was thinking about this because, we're at a year and a few months from this time, but we're also there's like a lot of astrology right now. I'm really into astrology in the planets that is very similar to what it was in like the end of March last year.
Oh, okay.
And I
did not
remember,
know that.
yeah, so it's like a reflection back because of these transits that like Mars and Saturn and Uranus are in, that was just like the sky was then.
Okay.
And I was thinking about this morning, and that feeling of like every single thing that brings me joy, except for the love of my life, except for my personal love relationship, every single other thing that brings me the most joy in the world, which is like being out amongst people, talking to people, performance, eating, drinking, restaurants, going to see shows, like theater, is over. And at that point, like maybe forever. And it was like, oh my God, like how does anyone find joy without any of those things, right?
Yeah.
It was a few months of like,
Yeah, I mean, and I feel like now when I use past tense, it's like a hopeful
I know.
past tense. Like that's how we were thinking and that's how it felt.
Yeah.
You know,
I know. I know.
Okay. So, can you take us, did you go directly from CUESA to this job?
Yes. So
was
yes.
it your choice?
Yes. I know.
Like,
very strange timing. But divine in some ways because I had left. I had given notice and left the CUESA position January 31st of 2020. Started this job February 18th of 2020, and then we went into shelter in place on March 16th.
month later, yeah.
So yeah, I had the new job, and luckily I had the new job for a month because I actually got to like be in FaceTime with people. But yeah, the entire pretty much after that first month in onboarding, the entire process was online.
What was it about this gig, this Pier 70 gig, that attracted you, that brought you in?
Yeah, the biggest reason, I think it's an incredible project. I love that it's a project where there's not like mass displacement happening. You know, it's like a commercial real estate project that's in an industrial space. It's the historic buildings, the historic core is so essential to San Francisco. It's so gritty and important, and the maritime piece is really important. So like just aesthetically, I loved it. And I do have a past of hanging out here, which we can talk about.
Sure.
But beyond that, the joy of being able to do what we're talking about, this umami of events, like this placemaking thing at the Ferry Building, the opportunity to get to do that literally from the ground up, like from the dirt to build it and be part of the vision of what it becomes and build it into all of the planning. And the people who are working on this project are like so smart and so on it and really get it that you can't just keep doing the same thing over and over and expect different results, like about, developments. And so this project went through a huge entitlement process, has been, really vetted by the community and approved by the community, and built into it at its core are like artists and makers and, this ethos of like San Francisco and being of the city, and really legitimately they hired me to hold that vision, which is, A, unusual for a development company to have a role like mine, but B, to hire a, big lesbian with this history to do it, right? Like who has this kind of like history here, I think is amazing to be part of.
Yeah, I mean, you spoke to this, but I don't have to tell you that for a lot of people in San Francisco, development is a bad word.
Yeah.
So and I feel like I'm gonna go on record and say like y'all are doing it the right way.
Yeah.
For everything that you just said.
Exactly.
For exactly those reasons.
Yeah. And it's like, why? Yeah, it's going to happen. Development's going to happen here.
Right.
So like, let's throw in for a project that like really makes sense. And that like, I am an activist. I do feel like it's important to me to be part of creating beautiful spaces in San Francisco. I love the city more than anywhere in the world. So even though I live in Oakland, sorry, Oakland. But I love San Francisco, and I feel really deeply committed to it being accessible, it having, diversity and inclusion built in from the ground up, like to be having the conversations around who is here and why are they here and who feels comfortable here and how do we make space, really make it so that there's, a feeling of belonging and that people come and they have experiences that they remember for the rest of their lives. You can't do it in a vacuum, you can't.
Right.
And you can't do it if you're just looking at your rental return, your ROI or whatever.
Right.
You have to do more than that, and this project really is. So
awesome.
Yeah.
You said that you were going to talk about being here in other capacities.
Yeah. So we were talking about the punk music scene, et cetera. And so back in the 90s in San Francisco, there were so many bands. Everyone I knew was in a band. My wife, I didn't know her well then. I knew who she was, but she was in a band. Tribe 8 was a big deal in terms of like the lesbian scene. And
were you ever in a band?
I was never in a band.
You never did music?
No.
Okay. Hey.
I'm band adjacent.
Right.
But yeah.
Right.
So there used to be just like impromptu shows out here, like all the time, like in these old warehouses. And I don't know.
With generators? Or
like generators and some of them and like lots of like fire pits and wild things. And so that's the other thing is that I don't know exactly where we were. Like I believe we were around here somewhere, but like it's so different now. It's really hard to say. But like there were Tire Beach. There were always shows at Tire Beach. But it was like we could do anything we wanted. We could do anything out here.
Like a playground.
For one person I know said recently, it's because we were invisible, and so we could do whatever we wanted. We were only visible to each other, right? Like the queer, punk, dykes, whatever of that time. Like we were only visible to each other, so we really got away with a lot. And there were just gigantic parties out here. And so that was the other thing is that when I first came out here to tour the site, and it was years ago. It was before I was thinking about this position or anything.
Oh, okay.
I had come out here, and I was walking around, and I was like, "Oh, I remember this energy. I remember this place. Like, and this is going to be really, really cool." And you can feel it. You can feel the energy. It's got great energy.
We've been ending episodes this season, which we kicked off in March, with our theme, "We're Still Here." There's been so much displacement. Obviously, the pandemic forced a lot of people out. A lot of people left on their own.
Yeah.
And we just wanted to make the point of we're still here, but we are still like the people on the show are still here.
Yeah.
Do you want to speak to that?
Sure.
I think built into the speaking to that is the near future of this city and kind of like envisioning it also with last summer's uprisings. Thinking about things in a new lens. Any of that, if you want to speak to it.
Yeah, I have been here long enough that I have now seen San Francisco change a lot. I feel like, the first .com bust and then the rise of tech and the sort of Silicon Valley-ness of San Francisco. Lots of different people displaced in different neighborhoods for different reasons, right? But it's like an ongoing story. And I feel like something really great is coming in terms of like the wave we're in, and that San Francisco could stand to lose some people who aren't here and don't care about the things we care about, right? And so if those people would rather live in Montana and work from home, then awesome, actually, right? Yeah. Like, let's clear out some space and let's let things settle in and get a little more affordable, and maybe we can really, champion some artists and some makers and some musicians and some photographers and some, broadcasters. Like let's create some space for that. And I'm like, to people who are like, it's over, I'm like, no way, look around. This is such a beautiful place, and it is perfect weather and amazing people. Like, it's not over. It's just gonna go through some changes, but I don't fear change.
That was Marcy Coburn. On the next episode of Storied San Francisco, friend of the show and past guest Broke-Ass Stewart comes back to share his life story with you. Episode 21 drops next Tuesday. Music for the podcast was produced, performed, and curated by Otis McDonald. Original photography is by Michelle Kilfeather. Aaron Lim of Bitch Talk Podcast is our contributing producer. And the show is produced and hosted by me, Jeff Hunt. Now in our 4th season, we have more than 150 episodes available on our website, storiedsf.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you can, subscribe, rate, and review our show so we can reach even more folks. And if you'd like to drop us an old-fashioned email, we'd love that. The address is storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, Stay strong, stay healthy, and we'll see you next time.
This podcast is a proud member of the BFF.FM podcast network. Learn more at podcasts.bff.fm.
BFF.FM, best frequencies forever.